Hello and welcome. We are coming to you live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you very much for tuning in. You are watching The Week Ahead with myself, Liezle Wilson. Of course, we take a look at the top stories for the week ahead. Well, let's take a look at some of those headlines before we delve into the top stories for today. Today marks the passing of the father of the nation, Nelson Mandela, 8 years ago. Eskom will suspend stage 2 roading blackouts from 9 p.m. tonight as the emergency generation reserves have adequately recovered. South Africa records over 16,000 new COVID-19 cases for a second consecutive day. Well, as we look at your headlines, getting to your top story today. Today, in fact, marks the passing of the father of the nation, Nelson Mandela, 8 years ago. Well, he lies buried at his beloved Qunu, just outside Mthatha. But despite the fame the village knows, all is not well. The residents of Qunu says they feel neglected and forgotten as many live in poverty and face many burdens.
On this day in 2013, the eyes of the world turned to Qunu. The village was in the glare of the global spotlight for 12 days. It still is quite picturesque, nestled along the N2. But the real picture emerges, heading into the village. Poor roads, a lack of housing, and no jobs, especially for young people. The villagers also went without water for months.
Our roads are in such a state. It's been 7 months without water in this village. People from other areas think highly of us. They don't know that we suffer a lot here. Even the water we drink from the river has diapers in it. People throw diapers in the river. And we have no other choice but to drink the water regardless.
We don't have water here. We get it from the river. But the people we vote for lie and say they do everything for us. We even experience constant power outages. Sometimes we sleep on empty stomach here in Qunu. We are struggling in this village of Talibunga.
Nombuyiselo Qwase is a Qunu resident. She is a pensioner supporting her family of 11 on her old age grant. Some of her children and grandchildren are also unemployed.
It's been 4 years since the RDP houses were built here. Some of us didn't get them. When we lodged a complaint, we were told that a new batch would be built. That's how we were lied to. We're still waiting even now. I stay with all my children here. I use all my pension money on food and funeral policies.
You have to bribe someone in order to get a job here. How do we have a bribe when you are not working? They sell jobs here. They even say we should give them 5,000 rands to get a job at the municipality. That's how we live in this village. There are so many young people who are not working here. They have now resorted to collecting sand from the river to sell it so they can make a living because we don't get jobs here in Qunu.
Local authorities are looking into the issues and residents' complaints.
There was a challenge of water outage in the area because of an electricity issue between us as the district municipality and Eskom. The matter was, however, later resolved and water was restored to the community, and the community had water access until recently. The recent water outage is caused by a faulty valve that we have ordered as the municipality, and once it arrives, we will fix the system.
In November, the grade of the municipality was there in our ward, plating our access road. That's why I'm saying the KSD municipality is taking care of access road. Yeah, there is a bypass at Lower Qunu, and that one is a tar road. Is having a potholes, but I've spoken to Sandra, because that one belongs to Sandra, and they promised to maintain that one. In our ward, we do have RDP houses, even though it's not enough. But our priority was destitute, disabled, and child-hazard household.
The residents are also concerned about crime, saying it's on the increase. They still remember the rape of Reverend Toko Changela. She was sleeping in this church when the perpetrator struck. Nobody has been arrested for the crime yet, and she will not see justice done. Reverend Changela died earlier this year. Fundiswa Mhlekude, SABC News, Umtata.
Right now, for more, we are joined by CEO of Nelson Mandela Foundation, Silo Hatang, and journalist Asanda Magatla to reflect on the life and times of the late former President Nelson Mandela. A very good afternoon to the both of you. Thank you for being part of the show today.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. And good to see you, Asanda, after such a long time, my sister.
Very good afternoon to you, Liezle, and of course, Braselo. The pleasure is all mine. It's been a long time indeed.
All right, so let's kickstart the conversation. I mean, we're looking at how extreme conditions provide opportunity for perhaps the best and also the worst in ourselves to emerge. And we know that Madiba led by example, making extraordinary concessions towards reconciliation, but also viewed with a mixed reception. I wonder, what did he come to represent for South Africa and the world at large?
Well, I think a moment like this presents us with yet another opportunity for us to ask ourselves, what kind of country did Madiba dream of? He dreamed of a more reconciled country that cares about the poor and the vulnerable, country that makes the constitution a lived experience, not just one that's theoretical, a country that makes sure that those who have no access to water have such services, but that it also holds responsible those who do not deliver services, that it makes sure that there's no impunity in our system, a criminality that's happening, and there's a feeling of impunity. It's something that we should say, it's a moment for us to reflect as a nation and say, do we represent that which Madiba thought we could be, a better nation that cares?
Oh, yeah, Asanda, let me bring you into the conversation on the back of what Silo's just echoed. I mean, and also perhaps as we look at some of the triple threats that continue to plague South Africa. I mean, back in 2013, you were at the helm of breaking the news that Madiba had passed. And I mean, why, despite not being employed and linked to other newsrooms at the time that the story broke, did you feel the need to get attached to a newsroom in order to be part of that historic moment?
Thank you for that question, Liezle. Utselo is far better placed to reflect on the legacy of Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. But I'll come in exactly as you put, that at that time, I wasn't attached to a newsroom. In fact, I had been poised to go into corporate, and I'd been interviewed by African News Network, AN7 back then, and I politely declined at the time to join them. But lo and behold, the news breaks, and even when the news was formally announced by the President of the Republic, President Jacob Zuma, we already could tell that something momentous was upon us. And I felt compelled to go back, put on my boots, and get back into the field once more when that news broke. In fact, the morning after, I didn't even go and report at AN7. I went straight to Vilakazi Street. The importance thereof being that in every generation, as journalists, there are stories of that generation. I would have been a young South African, a young Black girl child growing up, very interested in the developments of South Africa, her becoming as a nation, including, while our founding mothers and fathers were at Robben Island. So I would have been growing up while all of these events were unfolding. I would have been a child when Mandela was released in jail. And I remember he took a walk through the street in King Williamstown. And I was a child lining the street trying to grab him. But the point I'm coming to is that when we refer to stories of our generation, you need then that generation of journalists to step up and stand up to tell the story, because it's the sort of story that cannot be scripted. It's either lived experience, it's something you can narrate, at the bat of an eyelid. It's something that we refer to as skills without script. So when Fanon talks about a generational mission, it was my generational mission to be present in part of telling that story. And certainly as an African journalist, having lived, in the times of Nelson Mandela, be one of those people who are going to take it upon themselves to tell the story accurately.
Thank you so much for that, Asanda. I think when we look at the power of narratives and storytelling, Stella, I want to bring you back into the conversation. How do we begin to build a culture of moral leadership and accountability as a key ingredient for our democracy 27 years later? I mean, how do we continue to tell the stories and narratives that honor our people and all, despite obviously looking at the sacrifices undergone by our forebears to date?
One of the things that we have to do, Liezle, is to make sure that we begin to appreciate history and let it be taught in our schools. It saddens me every time to hear how we actually are neglecting our own history. Therefore, the narrative that then gets told is one that is skewed and tends to not recognize the complexity of the times that Madiba and his ilk had to deal with. It's the one that doesn't even care about the truth. In fact, it creates its own stories that tend to be so sanitized that they forget that there were complexities in that story. So it starts with our education system. The second layer is about ensuring that we take responsibility to be leaders ourselves. One of the key things that we've observed over the years is how most of us want leaders to come and lead us. Instead of saying, what can I do where I am based? Like Usis Asanda said now, that from where she was, she decided, I better tell this story from my vantage point. And I think if we do that, it means that we take the baton of leadership upon ourselves and we don't wait for others to then lead. The third one, I think, which is important, is to ensure that we build a more united nation, a nation that cares about what narrative divides us, narrative that keeps on making sure that right-wing voices are given space over those voices of others who are saying, let's unite as a nation. And we can do what Madiba dreamed of in 1994, of a more united country than we are at the moment, free of racism, free of xenophobia, free of gender-based violence in these 16 days of activism against women and child abuse.
Silo and Asanda, this next question is for both of you, and it is twofold. Silo, let's start with you. Perhaps Asanda could follow suit. I mean, in essence, tackling triple threats of poverty, inequality and unemployment. I mean, we've just heard the quarterly labor stats being released, 34.9%. I mean, these are worrying signs for the future at large, the future labor force of our country. How do we then begin to address this burden? How do we begin to address the fault lines associated with poverty and inequality in this 27 years of democracy, this dispensation?
Part of it is to bring in other experts into the field so that they help government rethink how we can industrialize our country more. To hear the numbers that are hitting young people are really heartbreaking. And it's that despondency that then kicks in and people lose hope in terms of what they can do or what they can't do. And I'm hoping that we will be a nation that begins to bring in other experts who can then bring in their own way of saying, maybe the way the Reserve Bank does things could be done different. Maybe the way the economy is run could be done differently. But it also goes back to us being a reliable provider of services. For the N3 to be blocked every other day does not help with us helping to have the economy be what it is. For us to have an economy that has Transnet being by all kinds of crimes, it does not help with us reimagining a country that employs more people. So it starts with us ensuring that we stop with things that disrupt the economy in ways that cannot get us to recover. And until such time that we do that, Liezle, we are going to find it to be an uphill battle. And it starts with us saying it stops here.
Sandra, what are your thoughts on the back of what Silo's echoed?
I was listening to the package, Liezle, that you played prior to the commencement of this interview. Just listening to the community of Qunu talk about its, village in that way. And I was driving on the N2 in the Transkei part of the Eastern Cape as recently as 2 weeks ago. Look, strides have been made. I was quite impressed with how better the road is still. At the same time, it hurt me no end to realize that it would seem as though we're still stuck somewhere when we look at our villages, the way that they look at the underdevelopment that is there. And you hear of people's despondency, which has been very much a consistent theme for the past decade and a half since I started becoming a journalist and practicing journalism. But to go back to what Uselo was saying, we have incredible leaders, and today is such a day that we get to reflect on one of them. We have to understand that they had a particular mission for their time and their generation. Where are the leaders now? In 2021, we cannot still be discussing, how we're going to reimagine governance. How many years post-democracy? 94, that would be about 16 years post-democracy. We're still reimagining governance. I would think that the baton having been passed on to us, and one wonderful thing I'll say about Utatu Mandela, Liezle, I think we constantly have to reflect on this. He came at a time, became the statesman, the first statesman of this country. And I say that statement deliberately because prior to that, we didn't have statesmen. We had, in Xhosa you say, different leaders, presidents of, a nation that was fractured and not united. But the first united South Africa, the first statement was Mandela. But Mandela had the good sense, only for 5 years he governed, handed over the baton. And perhaps there's something that we need to reflect on. While the Council of the Elders is so crucial and so important, especially for institutional memory, we have to also, because I believe that power doesn't only reside with governance, with foundations, for example, with us as citizens, mindful that ours is a participatory democracy, means that we also need to give the ideas that are required and relevant, the new thinking, and participate in that.
Well, Selo, Asanda's mentioned a very interesting point about leadership. And I wonder, given the past events of this year, elections, and obviously what transpired with the unrest back in July, it's definitely highlighted some harsh lessons, but important lessons for our leaders at large who were at the center of the country's transition to this new South Africa. And I guess my question is, what issues of leadership, commitment, and even communication were highlighted through these past events? What lessons can we learn from Nelson Mandela himself?
I think the most important thing that we need to go back to is the key to any leader's responsibility, one, is to inspire people. And I think if we are to get inspirational leaders at local government, we will do something different. But for as long as we don't have inspirational leaders there, we are in trouble. The second layer is ensuring that you remember where you come from. Most of our leaders have forgotten where they come from. Therefore, they forget that those key services that were provided in the past, which were short of making us a little bit more humane as a majority of our country, we need to go back there. The third one is ensuring that accountability is also for the, as Asanda said, is also for those who have to hold accountable the leaders. And you can't elect someone that is alleged to have raped someone, for example. On what basis would you be doing that? It tells you that the fabric of our society is now in trouble once you do that. And I think it goes back to the voter to then be asking themselves difficult questions. Legitimacy starts there. The last one is the sense of that we carry the responsibility for the country that we want. And I think if we carry that responsibility, it means that daily we have to do something different as a voter, as a leader, I must be looking at myself and saying, what am I doing to change the plight of the majority of our people? And until such time that those answers are answered, the 25 years of our democracy, the 27 years of our democracy and 25 years of our constitution will have no meaning.
Silo, it seems there are a lot of difficult conversations that need to be had. I mean, just looking at the issue of the proposed vaccine mandates and also the vaccination drives as a call to action. I mean, why at this juncture is it critical and crucial to do so, given the imminent fourth wave and also just the distorted narratives that we as a country are facing in the global sphere related to travel apartheid and even the lack of vaccine equity at large?
You know, I am saddened by this subject matter because the West has proved itself once again that they treat the continent as a disease-laden continent, that we are the burden of society in terms of disease, even where we are proving ourselves that we are actually above most of them in terms of the advancement of science and our doctors. And I'm saddened that we must, as a country, and as the continent, reject all attempts to make sure that to suggest that we are the burden, the disease burden of the world. So all this, the apartheid that's now being introduced in terms of healthcare, we must reject with everything we have. But to other African countries, other countries that are on our continent that are also discriminating against Southern Africa, all because we identified this disease. I'm urging them to change their stance because it's only when we do so that tourism will continue to thrive. I'm worried that jobs that were lost and regained recently will be lost again. That we must also encourage our people to vaccinate because it's proving itself that it's the only protection that we have. Currently, the strain, as it hits you, all you have are just the symptoms of flu. It's not as bad as it was in the past. And it tells you that vaccine might be working the way science has suggested. So I'm urging people that on this day, which is Madiba's anniversary, as we commemorate him, we must remember those who have lost their loved ones. And in their honor, we must go out and vaccinate.
Asanda, you earlier on mentioned some of the qualities about Madiba. I wonder if you could share one of your fondest memories about Madiba and also looking at the issue, looking at the stance of the world to date, the compassion that's needed now more than ever. How do you think we begin to channel those qualities and that spirit?
I think Selo put it very aptly. And for me, my mind immediately conjured up the memory of Mandela, the unifier. It has been very heartwarming to see South Africans' response to what has been happening in the past week, especially in light of this, apartheid that we're observing in vaccination and certainly the framing of the stories, which would seek to position South Africa as some kind of villain, whereas what we've demonstrated more than anything these past weeks is how incredibly advanced our microbiologists are, our scientists are. But at the back of that, I see how South Africans, without even, deliberately saying that much, but unifying behind this message of saying that we will vaccinate. A vaccinated nation is a better nation for all of us. And seeing also we would want to move on economically. We have seen how incredibly tough this pandemic has been on not just anybody's. We're not talking about general people, ourselves, Liezle. You have been affected. Selo has been affected. Our families' livelihoods have been affected. But the unity that has come through is what has been so impressing to me. And I think that Tatu Madiba, if he would see us and how we've been presenting a united front, despite the hardship, that we've been facing, how united and speaking the same language as we've been, he would be immensely proud. And even on this 8th anniversary of his passing, I think, you go on social media, you get so concerned sometimes to see how fractured we have become. And I battle to understand it. And I think that it's important, as we're doing today, to sit back and pause and say, ultimately, we are a better people because we come from this generation of people, our elders, our founding mothers and fathers, who taught us something that is indelible. And I see that unity at play, even in the past weeks. I saw that unity at play even in places where looting didn't even happen. When people wanted to tell us that we are different in terms of tribe, in terms of the xenophobia, instead we remembered what actually makes us the same, human beings. And we have people like Udada, Nelson Mandela to thank for that. And even though sometimes we maybe are too harsh on ourselves and our shortcomings, these are moments where we get to pause and say, you know what? Ultimately, the foundation was laid and we try our best to strive, to seek, and not to yield no matter how difficult the circumstances. That to me is the memory I have of Untatu Nolosila, Uyem. And truly, I think that, having gone through that, I'm absolutely invested in the future of this country because I would understand very well the sacrifices it took to attain this freedom. So here we are with it now. Our fathers, our mothers, our grandfathers paid for it in blood. We are going to run with it, and we have to absolutely refuse any attempt to put us back on the back foot.
Selo, just on the back of that powerful message Asanda just mentioned, compassion needed now more than ever. How do we begin to channel that spirit? And as the organization at large, what activities have you got planned to keep his legacy and memory alive?
Last year we responded to the call once the president had closed down the country, and we traveled over 25,000 kilometers, helping about 100,000 families. We saw the destitute state of many families. This year, similarly, we went out and we helped many more families again through what was a tough period. I think compassion at this point is really necessary. And talking of Madiba's values and Madiba's, what I remember fondly of him is what one should be doing now to also bring about reconciliation. May we never forget that July events has now brought in even more fractured parts in our nation, particularly in KZN. And as you travel through KZN, you're asking yourself, families that feel today that they've lost everything, and the looters are now getting jobs because following the looting. How do you forgive that? How do you reconcile with that? Those are questions that we need to then be working through. So next year we'll be working with the likes of Old Nushwa, Hulamin in KZN, the Institute of Africology in KZN, to try SACC, to try and again just bring people together, to try and bring people to see that issues of mental health are dealt with, that we can rebuild businesses with the Durban Chamber of Business, for example. So we'll be bringing more people together next year and trying our best to work with the Solidarity Fund to do that work that needs to be done. In the new year, we're saying all of us must just have the goal in mind. Get rid of, get more people vaccinated, get rid of this disease so that we can then grow our economy. But thirdly, that we become more compassionate people, that your neighbor shouldn't be struggling when you have something to share with them.
Selo Hatang, CEO of Nelson Mandela, award-winning journalist, Asanda Magaqa, again, thank you very much for your time today. Both of them joining us to reflect on the life and times of former President Nelson Mandela. In fact, as we know, today marks the passing of the father of the nation 8 years ago. Let's take a quick ad break. Of course, we continue with more news on the other side for a look at the week ahead. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back. You're tuned into the week ahead with myself, Liezle Wilson. More news at this hour. President Cyril Ramaphosa is on a 2-day working visit to Ghana. It's part of his tour to 4 West African countries, including Nigeria, Ivory Coast and Senegal, to strengthen bilateral and economic ties with countries in that region. Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo welcomed President Ramaphosa at the Jubilee House. It's the seat of government in Accra after a brief ceremony. SABC's correspondent Nabil Ahmed reports from Accra.
President Ramaphosa's visit seeks to boost trade and investments between South Africa and Ghana, and an inauguration of a binational commission here in Accra is expected to deepen ties between the two countries. Ghana and South Africa have signed bilateral agreements in the areas covering immigration, agriculture and transport to further boost economic relations. More than 200 South African-owned businesses in telecommunications, mining and retail are established in Ghana. President Ramaphosa will take part in a South Africa-Ghana Business Forum during his visit to discuss how to advance investments. Ghana and South Africa have pledged to work together to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic and limit its impact on their economies. While many African countries still have their land borders still shut due to COVID-19, President Ramaphosa hopes to start a discussion with Ghana's president on the need to safely open borders in order to boost intra-African trade under the Continental Free Trade Area after. The South African president will leave Ghana on Sunday and continue his working visit in Senegal. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, SABC News, Accra, Ghana.
Well, for more on President Ramaphosa's visit, we are joined by an Abidjan-based news correspondent, Liane de Baston-Pierre. Very good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us here today, Liane.
So lovely to be on the show, Liezle.
Yeah, and I think reception is very important, particularly at this juncture, given the geopolitical dynamics at large. I wonder if you could rehash what was the reception of President Ramaphosa's visit to Côte d'Ivoire?
Well, as soon as he landed, he was welcomed by President Alassane Ouattara and several of his ministers, including his prime minister as well. There was an army marching band that sang the national anthems of both South Africa and Ivory Coast. And from the airport to downtown where the presidential palace is, as well as to where Cyril Ramaphosa was staying, the streets of the economic capital, Abidjan, were lined with South African flags. Everywhere he went, he was welcomed and you could feel at home. He was also made a chief during this time as well. He had several engagements with business leaders, with ministers, as well as a state dinner that was organized for him or in his honor as well.
Liane, obviously understanding the trade benefits between South Africa and the West and the West of Africa is important. Also looking at the importance of building and strengthening and fostering, these kinds of relations amongst the African countries at large. I wonder if you could contextualize what those trade relations look like and the importance of building these relations for the continent.
It's absolutely important in that it's the continental free trade area really in motion. Those agreements that are made are very important because it's actually it's an operational aspect of the Africa continental free trade area. And if these visits don't happen, there will not be these the opportunity to see what you can actually have. The trade minister from South Africa was here and he was saying he's already spotted at least 2 opportunities where they can increase trade. For example, what we call the South African bakkie is really a need for that year. It's being manufactured in South Africa, and instead of sending it to Europe or North America, it could be sent straight to Ivory Coast instead of them being sent to Europe and then being imported into Ivory Coast from there. That was one thing. He said also in agriculture, that was another opportunity. And during this time that Cyril Ramaphosa was in Ivory Coast, they signed 9 cooperation agreements just with this country. Of course, it is a 4-nation visit and other agreements would have been signed in the other nations that he visited. But as Cyril Ramaphosa rightly said, let's turn these contacts into contracts and build our individual nations' economies at the same time.
Yes, obviously on the back of COVID-19, that has exacerbated some of the lived reality and experiences for most on the continent. Looking at this 4-day, this visit by Ramaphosa to the 4 countries in the bloc, I wonder, concluding his Ghanaian visit today, heading to Senegal next, what can we be expecting from this upcoming visit then?
So President Ramaphosa ends his four-nation visit in Senegal, and it's also on the sidelines of the Dakar International Forum, where they're going to be discussing peace and security issues on the continent. That, of course, coupled with the economic challenges that Africa is facing, there's also an increasing security challenge that we're facing as well. He will be there with 4 other heads of state from the continent as well. And apart from the forum that he will be attending, there is another official program that he will follow in Senegal as well. Senegal and Ivory Coast, of course, being the 2 main francophone economies in this part of Africa, and Nigeria and Ghana being the 2 anglophone ones. So I think the president combining this trip with these 4 big economies in this region and seeing how South Africa can benefit. I mean, when he said he looked at the economy in Cote d'Ivoire and how just in 10 short years the country has, from a post-electoral crisis, has really bounced back to having been one of the continent's leading, seeing the continent's leading growth figures in the past 10 years, or at least before COVID.
Yeah, and I want to conclude this conversation by perhaps looking at the tour, the timing of this tour under the shadow of the Omicron variant that obviously was discovered by some of our leading scientists on the continent. I wonder, when we look at issues of travel apartheid that's also come about, a vaccine inequity at large, what have the leaders' response been to this? How do we continue to tackle these narratives and misperceptions as well as ignorance as we foster relations amongst countries on the continent and solidify our role in the geopolitical atmosphere at large?
I think the images that we've seen coming out of this visit by President Ramaphosa have been really great in terms of showing the world at large that Europe and the United States can close their borders immediately without any further information with regards to the new variant. But Ivory Coast maintained its visit, Senegal maintained its visit, Nigeria maintained the visit, Ghana maintained the visit. So I think it shows a very strong signal visually and to the rest of the world that there is this South-South cooperation that can be fostered and can be used to fight back or to be more resilient on the continent against other nations that are so quick to close their borders to Southern African countries, in particular with regards to the Omicron variant.
Liane, thank you so much for your time today. Liane Deba-Sompier, again, Abidjan-based news correspondent, chatting and reflecting on President Cyril Ramaphosa's 2-day working visit to Ghana. Again, it's part of a tour of the 4 West African countries, including Nigeria, the Ivory Coast and Senegal, to strengthen bilateral and economic ties with the countries in that region. Again, thank you very much to Liane for her time. Let's take another ad break. We continue with more news on the other side. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Welcome back to the week ahead. Let's continue with more news at this hour now. South Africa has recorded over 16,000 new COVID-19 cases for the 2nd successive day. The National Institute for Communicable Diseases says 16,366 cases were identified in the latest 24-hour reporting cycle. Another 21 deaths have been reported. It now takes the death toll to 89,965. The Health Ministry says 57,949 people got a vaccine yesterday or got vaccinated yesterday, but the number of fully vaccinated people in South Africa is now only standing at 15 million. That is close to 37% of the population who are over 18 years of age. In other news to look forward to on the week ahead, South Africans will soon know whether the property clause in the Constitution will be amended to allow for expropriation of land without compensation. The Constitution's 18th Amendment Bill will be tabled before the National Assembly on Tuesday. The ad hoc committee to amend Section 25 of the Constitution adopted the bill and its report back in August. But the National Assembly will debate and vote on the bill. It will require a 2/3 majority to pass the bill, although some say even a higher threshold since it relates to the Bill of Rights at large. Well, Mercedes Besant takes a look at where it started and filed this report.
It started with an EFF motion amended by the ANC, which was brought before the National Assembly on the 27th February 2018. This was on the same day of the 40th commemoration of the founding father of the PAC, Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe, who died in 1978.
Almost 400 years ago, a criminal by the name of Jan van Riebeeck landed in our native land and declared an already occupied land by the native population as a no man's land. Van Riebeeck, the first descendant of the Dutch to arrive in the Cape, will later lead a full-blown colonial genocide, anti-black land dispossession criminal project, arguing that simply because our people could not produce title deeds, this land that they have been living in for more than 1,000 years was not their own.
The motion was then passed.
Honourable members, the outcome of the division is as follows. Those in favour 241, those against 83, there's no abstentions, and the motion as amended is therefore agreed to.
The Joint Constitutional Review Committee was subsequently tasked to investigate whether South Africans wanted the property clause to be amended. It conducted public hearings across the country.
Next speaker.
And later reported back that the majority of South Africans wanted Section 25 of the Constitution to be amended. This led to the establishment of the ad hoc committee to initiate legislation to amend the property clause to ensure expropriation of land where compensation may be nil. A draft Constitution 18th Amendment Bill was produced. The ANC stated that it wanted certain land to be owned by the state, but the EFF has been steadfast in its call for all land and natural resources to be under the custodianship of the state, while other opposition parties rejected any idea of constitutional amendments.
Whilst we believe that the process was transparent and fair and consistent with what Parliament has mandated, we do not think that the draft bill is going to permit for expropriation of land without compensation. We think it's a sellout bill. We're just revolving around the same question that the ANC is failing our people, and the ANC will leave our people with no option but to engage in extrajudicial processes of land reform here in South Africa.
It is premature to judge and suggest that people should take the law into their hands because parliamentarians are failing. Parliamentarians have not yet failed. Parliamentarians are hard at work. They've agreed on a program, and I have no doubt that that program will be followed and will produce the desired results.
After much toing and froing, the bill was adopted by the ad hoc committee in September. It will be brought before the National Assembly for final approval.
Whether the amendment will muster the two-thirds majority that it requires in order to be passed is another matter, and that's going to depend on the political parties in Parliament. I think there are some political parties that have made their positions fairly clear so far, but we'll have to see what happens when the bill comes before the House and exactly how parties vote on it.
The DA is confident that the bill will not achieve a two-thirds majority vote.
We will be voting against it. I don't think the ANC is going to have enough numbers to get this constitutional amendment bill through the House. It's not radical enough for the EFF. We believe that it is not desirable to amend that constitution. And the constitution should only be amended under very, very specific circumstances. And we remain committed to ensuring land reform in South Africa through other means other than amending the constitution and focusing on where the real impediments lie. So a completely unnecessary bill, we believe, and we hope to see it defeated in the House.
But if it is passed, the DA has threatened to go to court.
We're obviously also ready for legal challenges. We believe it is going to require a special amendment because it impedes on other rights enshrined in Chapter 1 of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, which would require it to get a special majority in the House and not just simply the two-thirds majority. And so we stand ready as well to challenge it legally should this bill be passed by the National Assembly.
Some opposition parties remain divided on the bill.
The Freedom Front Plus will on Tuesday vote against the bill, which seeks to amend the Constitution to provide for expropriation without compensation. We believe that any form of expropriation without compensation will be to the detriment of South Africa as a whole. It will lead to further poverty, it will lead to further unemployment, and it will completely collapse the South African economy. We cannot allow this. We are hopeful that the bill will not succeed, as a two-thirds majority will not be obtained.
The expropriation of land without compensation is not the PAC policy. The PAC is for land repossession. The PAC is for land restoration. We are a dispossessed nation. Our land was taken by force, and our land must be returned to its rightful owners. Anyway, on Tuesday, as PAC, we are going to vote in favor of expropriation of land without compensation, because anything that irritates and annoys the white people, we are going to support it. As long as the white people are not happy and comfortable with the land expropriation, we are going to vote in favor of it. But knowing very well that the PAC at some point is the only organization that will be able to repossess and restore the land to its rightful owners, the Africans.
It will be in this House where the final decision will be taken on whether the Constitution will be amended for the 18th time. A successful two-thirds majority vote requires 266 to 267 of the 400 members of the National Assembly to vote in favor of the bill. Mercedes Besend, SABC News, Parliament.
All right, let's take another break. We'll be right back after this. All right, welcome back to the week ahead. More news at the Sawa further afield. The death toll from Indonesia's Mount Semeru volcanic eruption has now risen to 13. Indonesian authorities say nearly 100 people were injured after the volcano erupted yesterday. The eruption from Semeru, the tallest mountain on the Java island, has also damaged a strategic bridge connecting two areas and has wrecked many buildings. Witnesses say the nearby villages are covered in debris and thick smoke, leaving them in pitch darkness. Indonesia straddles the Pacific Ring of Fire. It's a highly seismic active zone where different plates on the Earth's crust meet, creating a large number of earthquakes and also volcanoes. Back home, the Judicial Service Commission will interview candidates nominated for the position of Chief Justice from the 1st to the 5th of February next year. Acting President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, Justice Xolo Mlungisi Phetse, will oversee this process, where members of the public and interested institutions have been invited to make written submissions on the suitability of President Cyril Ramaphosa's 4 nominees for the position of Chief Justice. Now, the JSC says the interviews will be open to the public, and the President had earlier given leaders of parties represented in the National Assembly until the 24th of November to comment on the suitability of the candidates nominated.
The 4 nominees are Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, who's currently the Acting Chief Justice, Constitutional Court Justice Mbuyiseli Madlanga, President of the Supreme Court of Appeal Mandisa Maya, and Judge President of the Gauteng Division of the High Court Dunstan Mlambo. The African Transformation Movement says it wants the next Chief Justice to be a female.
Yes, I can confirm that President Zungula of the ATM has written to President Ramaphosa recommending Judge Mandisa Maya for the position of the Chief Justice in this country on 3 important grounds. The age of Judge Mandisa is an advantage. She'll be able to serve the full term of 12 years in that court. Number 2, the qualification she has. She also has 3 honorary doctorates from different institutions, acknowledging her work in the bench. She has been in the bench for 20 years. And also, if we are serious about women empowerment in this country, this is the opportunity for President Ramaphosa to fulfill that. It's a high time that we have a female Chief Justice in this country, and we believe as an ATM that Judge Mandela is the relevant and suitable candidate for the position.
Some parties want Zondo to ascend to the highest office in the judiciary.
The ACDP has nominated Deputy Chief Justice Zondo to fill in the vacant post of Chief Justice of South Africa. Deputy Chief Justice Zondo is a strong leader whose qualities became clearly visible during the Zondo Commission. He was not intimidated by politicians or by the wealthy people. So we believe South Africa needs a man of such strength and caliber who will be a good example to all the judges and encourage them to lead and to make rulings without fear or failure.
Chief Justice Raymond Zondo have proved himself over the years that he is a man of integrity, a hard-working person, a very honest person, and we feel that he will be suitable to carry out this big task of being a Chief Justice of South Africa.
But it seems EFF leader Julius Malema has a different take. This is what he said recently on Zondo's suitability for the top judicial position.
What does he do? He goes and wants to demonstrate that he's got more masculine power than Zuma, the masculinity. Bankhishetana makwafa at the expense of South Africa. Zondo. Zondo does not qualify to be our Chief Justice. Is the most incompetent person who has plugged this country into a crisis. He has single-handedly did that. He knew the implications of what he was doing. Now he goes to the Constitutional Court on agent basis. The Constitutional Court gives him agency and takes 4 months. 4 months to make a ruling on agency. And then they still say in their judgment, proudly so, agency is granted. Agency granted after 4 months.
Al-Jamaa says it's looking for a different kind of a Chief Justice.
I looked at the 4 series that President Ramaphosa sent me to look at of the 4 candidate Chief Justice. I could not find anywhere in their series that they had any knowledge of African jurisprudence or used it in their judgments while they were judges. Also, I could find no evidence that they use African sentencing methods. And I'm disappointed that we're going to have a Chief Justice that's steeped in European jurisprudence and European sentencing. This is not what South Africa needs. We are part of Africa, and we should set the lead in adopting African jurisprudence and African sentencing methods. And however, the 4 candidates are the best we have, and we hope that they will, if one of them is appointed, that they will set the new standards for judges to apply African jurisprudence in their judgments and African sentencing methods. This would have been very useful in dealing with the incarceration of President Zuma and also dealing with his corruption trial that is coming up very soon.
The DA says it has confidence in all 4 candidates.
The President sent us a letter asking us what our views and opinions were. The request was for the suitability of the 4 candidates that he had put forward. We responded that we felt that all of those candidates would be suitable candidates for the Chief Justice, and we would be happy with any one of them being appointed. I think they're all judges with a very, very good track record. I think that any one of them should be appointed. They will do a good job as the next Chief Justice of South Africa.
UDM leader Bantu Holomisa says his party will abide by President Ramaphosa's decision after consultation with the Judicial Service Commission. Mercedes Besant, SABC News, Parliament.
Well, that's all we have for you today. It has been an absolute pleasure as always. For myself, Liezle Wilson and the team, until next week, it's goodbye for now.